Pregnant wife catches billionaire husband buying a necklace for his mistress. Her revenge is brutal. In the whirlwind of luxury and secrets, one tragic discovery sets a fiery path of revenge in motion. Helena, 7 months pregnant and blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around her, stumbles upon a sparkling diamond necklace that her wealthy husband, James, clearly never intended for her. Her heart pounds with fury and heartbreak as she realizes the gift is meant for another woman, a mistress. In that moment, Helena's life shatters into 1,000 glittering pieces. Yet, beneath her devastation, a flicker of resolve ignites. What if this betrayal wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning of a brutal comeback? Helena Winter had grown up believing in fairy tales. Even as she approached her late 20s, she was the type of person who took joy in small acts of kindness, saw beauty in a hummingbird's wings, and believed that true love could solve anything. Maybe that was one reason she fell so hard for James Winter, a millionaire real estate developer known to the public as a charming philanthropist, a man who spent lavishly on charity balls and philanthropic dinners. He was tall, handsome, and had an easy confidence about him that made everyone from waiters to CEOs gravitate to him. They married 2 years ago in a ceremony that sparkled with rose gold decorations, crystal chandeliers, and the promise of a happily ever after. Now Helena was 7 months pregnant with their first child. At night, she would rest her hand on her belly, feeling the soft flutter of the baby moving inside her. She imagined the nursery they had decorated in warm greys and whites, with a moon and stars motif scattered delicately on the walls. Everything seemed like a dream realized. They had a gorgeous home nestled in the rolling hills of Connecticut, a luxury penthouse in New York City, and the means to travel anywhere. James's business was thriving. There was never a shortage of compliments from people who envied their marriage, their success, and their apparent closeness. They seemed like the perfect couple, glamorous, happy, and supportive of one another. But it was all an illusion. Red flags had been piling up like warning signs, though Helena had brushed them aside for months. James had started traveling more often, claiming he was consumed with new projects in Silicon Valley or overseas in Hong Kong. His phone was constantly buzzing with calls he took in private. He would come home late, occasionally with the faintest trace of perfume that wasn't Helena's. When she'd mention it, he'd laugh it off, chalking it up to an associate's wife hugging him at a party. Yet, every time Helena asked for specifics, the conversation ended abruptly, or James swiftly changed the subject to something else, flattering her about the new dress or her glowing skin. And Helena, soft-hearted, trusting Helena, believed him. One crisp evening, though, she felt a subtle but distinct shift. Her husband had left his tablet unlocked in the living room. Usually James was meticulous about securing his devices. He'd talk endlessly about privacy, NDAs, and critical business negotiations. That night, Helena was sitting on the couch, rubbing her growing belly, waiting for James to come down for dinner, when the tablet pinged with a new email. A subject line caught her eye. It said, "Your Tiffany Company purchase is ready. Tiffany Company." The name alone was iconic, conjuring images of that classic New York City flagship store on 5th Avenue, the turquoise boxes and sparkling diamonds behind glass counters. Helena's heart pounded faster. She told herself it was probably something James had purchased for her, maybe a push present or an anniversary gift. She opened the email with trembling hands. The message read, "Dear Mr. Winter, your custom-designed diamond necklace is complete. Please visit our flagship store on 5th Avenue to pick it up at your earliest convenience. We look forward to assisting you." Helena's eyes skimmed the details. A platinum chain, 2-carat diamond centerpiece, engraving "Forever in my heart." She sat in stunned silence. The baby shifted uncomfortably in her womb, as if sensing her unease. The day after tomorrow was their 2nd anniversary. Could it be for her? She felt a twinge of excitement, swiftly overshadowed by the concern that the cost and design sounded like something James might do, but the phrase in the engraving didn't ring a bell. James had never been the type to say "forever in my heart." He used different pet names, different phrases. In fact, if he were to choose an engraving for Helena, it might be something like "My Shining Star," or a reference to her beloved lullaby she often sang. This felt off. She closed the email, her mind swirling. Logic tried to reassure her maybe James wanted it to be a surprise, but an ache began to form in the pit of her stomach. She decided not to confront him right away. Instead, she'd wait, watch, and see if he revealed anything. The next morning, James left early, claiming he had a business meeting in Manhattan. Helena pretended to be asleep, but the minute she heard the click of the front door, she was up and dressed. She needed answers. She made a plan. She'd go to Tiffany Co. that afternoon, inquire about the necklace, and confirm whether it was indeed for her. It felt sneaky, but the growing suspicion in her heart demanded action. Helena drove into the city, her heart thudding in her chest the entire way. She parked near Fifth Avenue, ignoring her usual inclination to watch her spending on parking garages today. She just needed answers. Tiffany Company's flagship store dazzled beneath the morning sun, the polished door handles glinting like gold. Stepping inside was surreal. The store smelled of luxury and fresh-cut flowers, with showcases of diamonds, pearls and gemstones stretching across the floor. A polite man in a sharp suit greeted her. "How may I help you today?" She forced a smile. "I'm here about a custom necklace that was purchased under the name James Winter." The man typed quickly on a computer, then brightened. "Ah, yes, Mr. Winter. It's a lovely piece." He reached beneath the counter and brought out a turquoise box tied with a crisp white ribbon. "We're awaiting his visit tomorrow or the day after, but you're welcome to inspect it if you're Miss S. Winter." Helena swallowed hard as he opened the box. The necklace was breathtaking, a single round diamond set in platinum, shimmering even in the subdued store lighting. She glanced at the engraving on the back of the diamond setting. It read, "Serena, forever in my heart." Helena felt as though the ground had crumbled beneath her feet. Her pulse roared in her ears. The name Serena was not hers. She tried to hide the shaking in her hands as she closed the box. For a long moment she stood there, tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them spill. If she made a scene here, she'd lose any advantage she might have. Slowly, she drew a steadying breath. "That's lovely," she managed, her voice tight. "I'll let him pick it up." Without waiting for further conversation, she turned on her heel and left the store. Outside, the sounds of New York City rushed at her, taxis honking, tourists chatting, the hum of an approaching bus. Helena stumbled down the sidewalk until she found a quiet alcove near a boutique entrance, where she leaned against the wall, gulping in air. Her worst suspicions had been confirmed. The necklace wasn't for her. It was for someone else, someone named Serena. Before Helena met James, she had been an independent, spirited woman who believed that when injustice was done, you didn't just cry, you fought back. Over the last 2 years, love had softened her. She'd grown complacent, letting James make the major decisions. But now, beneath the heartbreak, a fire began to kindle. She felt the baby shift again, as if reminding her of her responsibility. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about her child's future. If James had the audacity to cheat on her while she was pregnant, how far would his betrayal go? She recalled an old friend from college, Lillian, who had gone on to become a private investigator. Helena had always found Lillian's work thrilling, but never expected to need her services. Now, it seemed like the perfect time to call. She needed evidence, concrete proof of James's affair. If she decided to divorce him, she needed leverage, especially to secure the future of her unborn baby. Later that evening, when she returned home, James was already there, pacing the living room, phone in hand. Upon seeing her, he adopted his usual warm smile. "Hey, honey, where have you been?" he asked with forced casualness. She felt the bile rise in her throat but pushed it down. "Just errands in the city," she replied, trying to sound normal. James stepped forward to kiss her on the forehead. She felt the coolness of his touch, the hollowness in his eyes. He was checking to see if she suspected anything. She forced a tired smile. "I'm exhausted. The baby's been active," she said, heading upstairs without further explanation. Inside their bedroom, she could hardly rest. Her mind ran through possibilities of how James had met this Serena, how long the affair had been going on, and whether he'd choose to be with Helena or the Mistress if forced. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized she didn't want to be someone's second choice. She was carrying his child. For goodness sake, she deserved love, respect, and loyalty. She reached for her phone and texted Lillian, "Need your help. It's urgent." Lillian met Helena at a discreet cafe in downtown Stamford the next day. Dressed in jeans and a leather jacket, Lillian exuded a confidence that reminded Helena of their college days. She had short, spiky hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Over 2 cappuccinos and Helena's decaf latte, Helena poured out her story, James's suspicious behaviors, the growing distance, and the final confirmation at Tiffany and Company. Lillian's face was grim. "I'm sorry you're going through this, Hel. You don't deserve it." She paused, considering her friend carefully. "Are you sure you want to go through with an investigation? Sometimes, once you open Pandora's box, you can't go back." Helena looked down at her belly, her heart tightening. "I have to know, and I need proof. This is bigger than me now." Lillian nodded and laid out her plan. She had a team of discreet operatives who could follow James, hack or monitor his emails in legal ways, and gather photographic evidence. She'd document James's movements, capture him with Serena if possible, and compile everything Helena would need in a worst-case scenario: confrontation, divorce, or even blackmail if it came to that. The next few days were nerve-wracking for Helena. She performed her usual routine doctor's appointments, prenatal yoga, and even some nursery decorating while trying not to think about what Lillian might uncover. James remained pleasant if somewhat distant at home. He seemed stressed, but Helena suspected it was from juggling 2 women. Despite her roiling emotions, Helena began noticing every detail: how he'd check his phone, the moment it buzzed, how his smiles never quite reached his eyes, how the kiss goodnight had grown perfunctory. One late evening, Helena was reading in bed when she received a text from Lillian. "He's at the Rosewood Hotel with her. We'll send details soon." Helena's blood went cold. The Rosewood Hotel was one of the most luxurious spots in New York City, boasting high-end suites and a bar frequented by celebrities. It made sense that James would choose a place that matched his lavish lifestyle. Heart-pounding, Helena waited for the next text. Several minutes later, Lillian sent photos. The images were startlingly clear. James in an elevator with a striking brunette on his arm. Then another shot, James and the brunette entering a suite, the door closing behind them. Helena stared at the woman. She was tall, model-like, with shimmering hair that spilled in waves down her back. Her face was partially turned away, but Helena could see a satisfied smirk on her lips. Serena. This was the woman who had captured her husband's attention, and James was obviously smitten. Helena's first instinct was to drive to the hotel, bang on the suite door, and scream. But then her unborn child kicked an oddly well-timed reminder. She couldn't be rash. She was in her 3rd trimester, and stress was dangerous. Also, James was cunning. If Helena confronted him without a plan, he might lie, cover his tracks, or even blame her for invading his privacy and spin the story in some twisted manner. So she waited. When James returned home the following afternoon, she forced herself to greet him with a tired smile. her face betraying only slight exhaustion, not the raging fury she felt inside. "Working late again?" she asked casually, flipping through a magazine at the kitchen counter. "Yeah," he replied, tossing his jacket aside. "Big project. These clients are driving me nuts." Helena glanced at him. "You must be exhausted." He shrugged. "A bit. I might head to bed early." "You?" She nodded. The conversation felt painfully mundane. He gave her a half hug, a brief kiss on the cheek, and trudged upstairs. Helena watched him go, thinking about how easily he slipped into this domestic role. How could he be cheating mere hours earlier, and then return like nothing was amiss? The thought made her stomach churn. That night, she barely slept. Thoughts of Serena, the baby, and James's betrayal circled endlessly in her mind. In the early hours of the morning, she recalled a detail from Lillian's photos. James was carrying a small turquoise bag when he accompanied Serena into that suite. Tiffany and Company. Without a doubt, that was the diamond necklace. Her gift, no, the mistress's gift. Over the next week, Helena maintained her facade. Lillian provided regular updates and more incriminating evidence, timestamps of James visiting Serena's penthouse in Manhattan, receipts for extravagant dinners, spa appointments, charged to James's corporate card. Each piece of evidence was like a knife twisting in Helena's heart, but it also fueled her determination. She recalled a vital fact. James's fortune was built on real estate developments, but he had always used a complex network of shell companies and partnerships to minimize taxes and liability. Helena had only a surface-level understanding of these structures. James rarely discussed the details, but she knew enough to realize that his empire might be more fragile than it appeared. If his public image took a hit, or if his partners discovered scandal, he could lose crucial backing. Additionally, his philanthropic facade was important for sustaining good relationships with city officials. A public scandal would be disastrous for his business. Helena decided to get in touch with one of James's old friends, a lawyer named Andrew Davis, who had always harbored a quiet fondness for her. Andrew was the type of person who knew how to keep secrets, but also valued justice. If Helena needed leverage against James, Andrew would know exactly where to apply the pressure. She arranged to meet Andrew for lunch at a private club in Greenwich. Andrew listened attentively as Helena revealed James's infidelity and the evidence she'd gathered. His face grew somber. "I'm sorry, Helena," he said softly. "Are you sure you want to go to war over this? Divorces can be messy, particularly when there's this much money at stake." Helena's jaw tensed. "I'm sure, but I won't act rashly. I have to consider my baby. I need to guarantee our future. That means I need to protect myself legally, financially, and emotionally." Andrew nodded. "Given that James has a reputation to uphold, if you serve him with a well-documented case of infidelity, it might force him into a very favorable settlement for you, especially with the baby involved. You could hold the threat of a public scandal over his head, but..." He trailed off. "But what?" Helena asked. Andrew hesitated. "He might not go down without a fight. And there's always the risk that you come out looking vindictive. You might face public scrutiny. The tabloids love a scandal like this, especially if James's name is big enough. If you're serious, we'll need more than just proof of his affair. We'll need something that truly puts him in a corner." Helena stared at the tablecloth, swirling her ice water absent-mindedly. "I don't just want a settlement. I want him to feel the same pain he's inflicted. This man has humiliated me, disrespected our vows, and risked our family's future with his fling. It's not just about money. It's about teaching him a lesson he'll never forget." Andrew studied her face, seeing the steely resolve there. "I understand. Let's keep in touch, and I'll wait for your instruction." One evening, Helena was reorganizing the nursery closet when her phone rang Lillian again. She answered quickly. "You won't believe what I've found," Lillian said, her tone a mix of excitement and gravity. "I did a deep background check on Serena Caldwell. She used to be an aspiring actress, had minor roles in off-Broadway productions. Then she disappeared from that scene after hooking up with some wealthy older men. Her track record is interesting, to say the least. She's been involved in a few hush-hush paternity disputes." Helena felt her skin prickle. "Meaning," Lillian sighed, "meaning she might have gotten pregnant by someone wealthy before, or at least claimed to. She sued a businessman in Florida for child support, but eventually dropped the suit, probably after a hefty settlement. It seems Serena is a professional gold digger. She attaches herself to powerful men, squeezes out as much money or gifts as possible, and then moves on." Helena's eyes narrowed. "Does James know about this?" "Hard to say," Lillian replied. "She might be lying to him, but if James is truly smitten, he might be ignoring all the warning signs. A woman like Serena knows exactly how to play a man, especially a wealthy one. She probably told him she loved him, that she was different from all the rest, and he fell for it." That news fueled Helena's anger further. Her husband was not just cheating, he was also gullible enough to fall for a con artist. The baby stirred within her, like a reminder that time was ticking. She needed to finalize her plan. Helena lay awake in bed that night, her mind buzzing with strategies. Divorcing James would be simple enough with the evidence of his infidelity. But that wasn't enough. She wanted to do something that stung, something that reminded him he couldn't just treat people like disposable objects. She considered the timing carefully. She was due in about 2 months. It might be risky to enact a massive plan now, but it also might be perfect. James would never expect his pregnant wife to have the time or energy for cunning moves. She texted Lillian in the morning, telling her she wanted more in-depth information on James's business dealings. She wanted something that could cause genuine fear in him, potentially an angle that would threaten his carefully curated public image. In a matter of days, Lillian delivered. She discovered that James had forged some signatures and manipulated zoning permits to expedite one of his real estate projects in upstate New York. It wasn't strictly legal, and if it came to light, James could face investigations or even legal charges. Helena's eyes gleamed when she heard this. She could hardly believe how reckless James had been. Then again, he'd been so used to bending the rules to his advantage. With the right push, this scandal could take James down a few notches, maybe even threaten his entire empire. But Helena had to use the information wisely. She decided on a 2-part approach. 1. Expose James's infidelity to close friends and family, ensuring that his reputation took a hit in personal circles. 2. Subtly leak the shady zoning permit details so that it reached potential business partners, causing them to second-guess their collaborations. Simultaneously, she'd give James the chance to offer her a significant settlement enough to secure her child's future for life. If he agreed, she might consider calling off the full exposure. If he refused, she'd open the floodgates. To set the stage, Helena planned an elaborate dinner party at their Connecticut estate, ostensibly to celebrate the upcoming baby's arrival. She invited James's key business associates and their spouses, along with some of her closest friends. The day of the party, she wore a flowing emerald dress that showcased her pregnant belly, yet still radiated elegance. James, oblivious, was all smiles, playing the perfect host. All evening, Helena flitted from conversation to conversation, forging alliances without James's notice. She hinted that she was worried about James's business stress, mentioning that he'd been working peculiar hours and seemed distant. She watched as concerned glances passed among guests. Subtly, she planted seeds of doubt about whether James was truly the saintly husband everyone believed him to be. During dinner, Helena stood to make a toast. Holding her sparkling cider, she began with a warm smile. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this wonderful moment in our lives." James and I are thrilled to welcome our baby soon. I must say, motherhood has already taught me so much, especially about the importance of honesty and trust." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. She saw James's smile falter slightly. "I've learned that secrets have a way of coming out, no matter how hard we try to hide them." A few people looked puzzled. James shot Helena a warning glance, but she carried on with a sweet grin. "So, let's raise a glass to new beginnings. May they be free of secrets and built on honesty." Applause followed, but a tense undercurrent churned through the room. James tugged on his tie. He was no fool. He recognized the undertone of her words. Yet he forced a chuckle and kissed Helena's cheek. "Well said," he murmured, his eyes searching hers in confusion. The next morning, James cornered Helena in the study, his jaw set in annoyance. "What was that toast about?" he demanded. "You sounded like you were referencing something specific." Helena gave him a placid look. "Just thoughts on marriage, trust, and the future." He narrowed his eyes. "If something's bothering you, let's talk about it." Her gaze flickered. "Would you tell me if you were hiding something, or would you lie about it?" James's face paled momentarily. She saw him recalculating, trying to keep his composure. "Where is this coming from? You're acting paranoid. Maybe it's the hormones. That jab stung." Helena took a steadying breath. "Stop using my pregnancy as an excuse. I'm not stupid, James. I want you to be honest with me. Right now, are you having an affair?" His eyes flitted away for a second. That was all Helena needed to confirm her worst fears. But she waited for his response. "Of course not," he finally said, his voice lacking conviction. "I love you. You know that." She snorted softly. "You're lying." With that, she turned and left the study, leaving James standing there, jaw clenched in anger. She knew he'd likely confront her again, but for now, letting him stew in uncertainty worked to her advantage. Over the next day or so, Helena began implementing the second part of her plan. She called Andrew and gave him the go-ahead to quietly leak the zoning permit scandal to a strategic contact, someone who'd alert James's potential new partners. She wanted them to start asking questions, instigating a panic within James's circle. Simultaneously, Helena confronted James with a written ultimatum. She wanted a postnuptial agreement that would grant her full custody of their child, a substantial financial settlement, and ownership of certain assets, such as the Connecticut house, if they divorced. She placed it in a sealed envelope on his desk, labeled in bold letters. 2 days later, James came home fuming. The minute he walked through the door, Helena could sense his rage. He stormed into the living room where she was reading, brandishing the sealed envelope. "What is this?" he hissed. Helena looked up calmly. "You read it. You tell me." He threw it onto the coffee table. "You're threatening me. A post-nuptial agreement on top of this nonsense about an affair?" "Nonsense," Helena repeated. She stood, bracing herself for the confrontation she knew was inevitable. "I know about Serena Caldwell. I know about the necklace from Tiffany's. I know about your nights at the Rosewood Hotel." "I have photos, James." For a moment, James looked like he'd been punched in the gut. His face went white, and he actually staggered a step backward. Then anger replaced shock. "You've been spying on me?" Helena let out a bitter laugh. "I've been protecting myself, my unborn child. You left me no choice." He began pacing, raking his hands through his hair. "It's not what you think," he muttered. "Serena she's just a distraction. It's business too. She knows people. I need to close a deal." "Don't insult me," Helena snapped, her voice trembling with outrage. "I've heard enough lies. I want you to sign that agreement, guaranteeing me everything I'm asking for, or else I release the evidence of your affair to your business partners, your family, your mother, the press. You name it." And that's not all. He paused, eyes widening as she pressed a manila folder into his hands. Inside were documents detailing the zoning permit fraud. She saw the color drain from his face again. "You're blackmailing me," he whispered. She folded her arms over her chest. "I'm giving you a choice. Make me whole or face the consequences." That night, James refused to sign anything, storming out of the house in a rage. Helena guessed he'd run straight to Serena, seeking solace or advice. Sure enough, a few hours later, Lillian texted Helena that James was at Serena's penthouse. But something unexpected happened. At around midnight, Helena's phone buzzed again. It was a call from Lillian, her voice urgent. "You won't believe this, Hel. Serena just got into an argument with James. She kicked him out of the penthouse. There was shouting. Neighbors heard everything. Something about money. Helena felt a grim satisfaction. She'd suspected. Serena was a gold digger. Now that James's business was showing signs of trouble, Serena must have smelled the potential downfall. The cracks in James's empire were starting to show. If James lost everything, Serena would jump ship faster than anyone could blink. The next morning, Helena found James asleep in the living room, stubble shadowing his jaw, tie loosened, his suit rumpled. An empty whiskey glass sat on the side table. She quietly made breakfast, the smell of coffee filling the kitchen. When James finally stirred, he trudged to the kitchen counter. "You have no idea what you've done," he said hoarsely. "My investors are backing out of a major development. They got wind of some rumored legal irregularities. My phone's been blowing up all morning. People want answers." Helena offered him a calm gaze. "So sign the agreement." James slammed his fist on the counter, making her jump slightly. "This is my life's work. You're trying to ruin me, Helena." A flicker of pain crossed her face. "You already ruined something far more precious, our marriage. You want to talk about destruction? How about what you did to me, to our child? This was supposed to be a time of joy, and you chose to betray me." Tears stung her eyes despite her attempts at composure, and for a moment James looked regretful. "I never meant for it to go this far," he whispered. "Serena was just. She was fun, a break from the stress." "I didn't think." "No, you didn't think," Helena said quietly. "And now you have to face the consequences." He slumped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. The tension in the room was palpable. Helena almost felt sorry for him. But then she remembered the Tiffany necklace, the nights at the hotel, the lies upon lies. Her resolve hardened. Just when Helena thought the drama might hit a standstill, she received an unexpected call. The caller ID read blocked, but she picked up anyway. "Hello, is this Helena Winter?" a sultry female voice asked. Helena's breath caught. "Yes, who is this?" "It's Serena Caldwell," the woman purred. Helena tensed. "Why are you calling me?" A slight pause. "I thought you might want to know what James is up to. We had a falling out, and I can't stand being lied to anymore." "I suspect you and I have more in common than you think." Helena gripped the phone. This was unexpected. "Go on." Serena let out a bitter laugh. "Your husband told me he was leaving you, that you were a frigid, controlling woman who only married him for his money. He claimed he didn't want the baby, that it was all your idea. He said he wanted to start a fresh life with me. Then, after he gave me that necklace, I found out he was lying about half his promises. He wouldn't even pay off my debts. Then I heard rumors that his business is in trouble, so I told him to get out." Helena inhaled slowly, her heart pounding. So James had planned to discard her, to disclaim interest in their baby, and he was feeding Serena a sob story. "What do you want from me?" Helena asked, her voice eerily calm. "I want to get even," Serena said. "I gave up some opportunities for James. I turned down other suitors who could have offered me more. So if there's a way to bring him down together, I'm in. Helena paused. She didn't trust Serena for a second, but this could be useful. I don't need your help, Helena said. I've already got enough leverage on James. Serena snickered. Suit yourself. But if you need me, you know how to reach me. The call ended, leaving Helena feeling slightly shaken. James had lied to Serena about his intentions. Not that Helena was surprised, but hearing it confirmed from the mistress's own mouth stung. It made her realize how twisted James had become, or perhaps had always been. As the tension escalated, Helena decided it was time to involve James's mother, Margaret Winter. A stern, classy woman in her 60s, Margaret adored Helena and often said she'd never seen James so happy as when he was with her. Helena had hesitated to drag the older woman into this mess, but Margaret was the closest thing to a moral compass James had. Helena invited Margaret over for tea. She couldn't hide her distress. A few minutes into their conversation, Margaret placed a hand over Helena's. "Dear, you look so troubled. Tell me what's wrong." Tears welled in Helena's eyes. She recounted James's affair, the necklace, the hotel visits, and the heartbreak. Margaret listened in silence, her face pale with shock. "I can't believe he would do this," Margaret whispered, her voice trembling. "You're carrying his child. How could he be so heartless?" Helena dabbed her eyes with a tissue. "I love him, Margaret. Or at least I loved who I thought he was, but I can't forgive him for this." Margaret squared her shoulders. "He's my son, but I won't excuse his behavior. If you need me to testify or stand by you, I will. He must face the repercussions of his actions. I won't let him ruin your life or my grandchild's." Deep gratitude welled up in Helena. She hugged Margaret tightly. "Thank you. I hope he realizes what he's lost before it's too late." In the days that followed, Helena's plan reached its crescendo. She sent James an ultimatum via email, an official request to sign the postnuptial agreement. Attached were damning photos and documentation. She CC'd Andrew Davis, her lawyer friend, to show she was serious. The response was swift. James came home earlier than usual, looking haggard and disheveled. "We need to talk," he said in a defeated tone. Helena watched him warily. "I'm listening." He swallowed hard. "I'll sign, but I need you to keep everything under wraps. I can't lose my company, my reputation. I can't lose my freedom." Helena's lips pressed into a thin line. "You should have thought about that before taking a mistress," he sighed, rubbing his temples. "I know. I was an idiot. I never wanted to hurt you or our baby. Please, I'm begging you." Helena pulled out the document, pointing to the signature line. "Sign." His gaze flicked up to hers, searching for mercy, but she only offered a stern, unyielding expression. With a shaking hand, James signed. She felt a strange pang in her chest, watching him scrawl his name. A part of her had loved this man deeply. Seeing him reduced to this state made her heart twist with pity, anger, and a tinge of sadness. When it was done, she slipped the papers back into a folder. "I'll have my lawyer file these," she said. "So we're clear? If you don't abide by every term in that agreement, I will release everything." He nodded, looking like a man awaiting execution. "Understood." Helena turned to walk away, but James grabbed her wrist gently. "Helena, She didn't let him finish. She pulled free. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't say anything. It's too late. You should have thought about your family before you decided to stray." Even after James signed the agreement, the tension in the house was unbearable. Helena felt suffocated, sharing the same space with him. She had Andrew expedite the legal process to ensure her assets and future were secure, should she file for divorce. James tried to talk to her several times, offering apologies and half-hearted explanations. Helena listened in stony silence. She was beyond caring about his reasons. He'd humiliated her in the most public and personal way possible. No amount of apologies could mend the shattered trust. Meanwhile, Rumors began swirling in social and business circles. Word got out that James and Helena were on rocky terms. Some suspected an affair, others attributed it to business stress. Investors withdrew from deals, not wanting to risk association with potential scandal. James's empire began to wobble, though he scrambled to contain the damage. Serena Caldwell, for her part, disappeared into the shadows. According to Lillian, she left New York altogether, possibly hooking up with a new benefactor. Helena hardly cared. She was just relieved that the woman was out of her life. One afternoon, Helena was in the nursery, folding baby clothes, when James trudged in. He looked pale, eyes rimmed with fatigue. "We need to talk about finances," he said quietly. She turned, arms folded. "I'm listening," he swallowed. "My accounts are frozen or under investigation. The leaked information about the permits triggered a federal inquiry. My partners have pulled out. The bank is threatening to foreclose on a couple of developments. Helena, I'm losing everything." A tiny spark of vindication lit inside her. "You should have realized how precarious your position was before you broke our vows." He sank into the rocking chair. "I know I deserve this. But what about the baby? Our child shouldn't suffer because of my mistakes." Helena stared at him. Despite her anger, she didn't want her child's future endangered by James's downfall. "I've taken steps to protect the baby," she said. "I have the post-nuptial agreement. If you go bankrupt, you'll still owe child support. But I can't magically fix your business problems." James nodded miserably. "I'm going to try to salvage what I can. But I wanted you to know I'm truly sorry." For a fleeting moment, Helena almost believed he was sincere, but her heart was too bruised to forgive. "You made your bed, James. Now you lie in it." In the final weeks of her pregnancy, Helena began to question whether she wanted James in the delivery room at all. The idea of him holding her hand after what he'd done was repulsive. On the other hand, this was also his child. She wrestled with the decision, confiding in Margaret for guidance. Margaret was gentle yet firm. "Helena, you have every right to bar him from the delivery if you choose. But remember, the baby will ask about his father someday. How you handle this moment might influence your child's sense of belonging." Helena nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I'm so torn. I don't want him near me, but I also feel guilty." Margaret squeezed her hand. "Follow your instincts. No one can decide but you." A few days before Helena's due date, her water broke unexpectedly in the middle of the night. She was alone in the house. James had been staying at a hotel for the last week to avoid tense run-ins. Panicked and in pain, Helena called Lillian, who rushed her to the hospital. In the flurry of hospital corridors and nurses hooking her up to monitors, Helena gripped the bed rails, breathing through contractions. She didn't call James. She was determined to bring this child into the world, surrounded by people she trusted. Margaret, upon hearing the news, arrived shortly after, holding Helena's hand as she labored. Finally, after hours of pain, Helena gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The moment she heard his cry, the world seemed to shift. Tears streamed down her face as the nurse placed him on her chest. His tiny hands and pink cheeks filled her with a surge of protective love. In that moment, James burst into the delivery room, panting and out of breath. He must have heard from Margaret. He froze at the sight of Helena, cradling their newborn. For a brief second, pure wonder filled his eyes. But Helena's heart was hardened. She turned away, shielding her baby from him. "You weren't invited," she murmured, pressing her lips to the infant's forehead. James stood there, a mixture of longing and regret etched into his face. He didn't push the issue. He simply watched from a distance as nurses tended to Helena and the newborn. In the days that followed, Helena named their baby Oliver. She allowed James to visit Oliver occasionally, but always with a nurse or Margaret in the room. She didn't want to speak with him. She was healing physically from childbirth, emotionally from betrayal. Meanwhile, James faced the brunt of his bad decisions. His real estate empire collapsed under legal scrutiny. He managed to avoid jail time by cooperating with authorities, but he lost significant business deals, property, and the confidence of high-profile investors. Reports swirled in the media about potential fraud in his developments. Some tabloids even hinted at an affair that had triggered internal turmoil. His name became tainted, a symbol of a millionaire's hubris leading to downfall. Helena, with the help of Andrew, filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The postnuptial agreement ensured she received a handsome settlement, though James's finances were severely depleted. She kept the Connecticut house, enough funds to secure Oliver's education, and a tidy amount to rebuild her own life. One afternoon, Serena Caldwell's name resurfaced in the news. She had apparently sold her story to a gossip magazine, detailing her affair with James Winter, even providing pictures of the Tiffany and Company necklace, text messages, and more. The article painted James in an unflattering light, a philanderer who neglected his pregnant wife for a mistress. Public opinion turned sharply against him, even among his former supporters. Helena felt a strange sense of closure. She had initially threatened to release similar information herself, but Serena had done it for her own gain. In the end, James's downfall was sealed. The public humiliation was complete. In the weeks and months after Oliver's birth, Helena focused on being a mother. She found solace in the daily routines of feeding, rocking, singing lullabies, and watching her son's every miraculous first. The heartbreak lingered, but her child's smile offered an unexpected balm. When James came by to see Oliver, he was a shell of the man he'd once been humbled. Quiet, almost broken. Helena allowed only short, supervised visits. She wanted Oliver to know his father, but she also needed to protect her peace. Helena began therapy to heal from the betrayal. She also reconnected with friends she'd lost touch with during her marriage. Bit by bit, she reclaimed her identity. She discovered she had a talent for interior design, a passion she'd dabbled in before marrying James. With her settlement money, she opened a small design studio, determined to forge a future where she could stand on her own 2 feet. Every so often, she found herself reflecting on the extraordinary lengths she'd gone to for revenge. A part of her worried that she'd stooped too low, that she'd become vindictive. But then she reminded herself that James had made his choices. He had sown the seeds of his own destruction. She had merely refused to be his victim. Nearly a year passed after Oliver's birth. The final divorce decree was signed, awarding Helena primary custody. She stood on the balcony of her Connecticut estate one morning, gazing at the sprawling lawn where Oliver would someday run and play. A sense of peace enveloped her, a freedom she hadn't felt in a long while. Margaret often visited, doting on Oliver, grateful that Helena hadn't cut the Winters out of her life entirely. As for James, he lived more modestly now, renting a small condo in the city. He had begun a slow, painful climb back to some semblance of financial stability, taking smaller consulting jobs. He never asked for Helena's forgiveness outright, perhaps believing he didn't deserve it. One bright spring day, Helena sat on the grass with Oliver, now toddling around with bright, inquisitive eyes. She watched him chase a butterfly, giggling in the sunlight. She realized that even though her marriage ended in betrayal, it had given her the greatest gift of all, her son. The memory of James's betrayal was still a wound, but it no longer bled. It was a scar that reminded her of her own strength, her capacity to overcome, and the fierce love she had for her child. Her revenge had been brutal, yes, but it was also a means of survival in a cruel, unexpected storm. And from that storm, she had emerged stronger, with a future she could shape on her own terms. Thank you for joining me on this intense journey through betrayal, heartbreak, and ultimately, fierce empowerment. Helena's story is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, when trust is shattered and innocence lost, one can rise stronger and fight for what truly matters. She refused to be a victim and claimed victory over her destiny, ensuring that her child's future remained secure. It's a tale of brutal karma, proving that actions always have consequences. And sometimes, those who betray end up facing the harshest punishments of all. If you found yourself captivated by the twists, the passion, and the retribution in this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more riveting tales like this one to life. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Helena's position? Until next time, stay strong and stand up for what's right.